our guest in this segment. We catch up with Valerie, it seems, only when schools have a day off, because she is a special education aide in Jefferson County Schools, had children that were in the Berkeley County Schools in the special education programs as well. Wrote a book about her experience in Berkeley County and the state of West Virginia in terms of trying to get help for your special education child. And it was an eye-opening book. Valerie, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great, thank you. Good to have you here in studio.
It's nice to see you guys in person. I didn't know if I was going to make it.
Yeah, I guess the interstates are pretty clean, but the side roads are still a bit of an adventure this morning.
Yes, it was like sled riding with wheels.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So be careful. Don't overdrive the conditions. I think yesterday during the snowstorm, I get the Alert Berkeley texts on my phone, and I think it was about every 5 minutes that ID1 was shut down, it was reopened. It was shut down, it was reopened. It was shut down, it was reopened. And this kind of went on all afternoon yesterday with the different lanes in the accident. So, let's don't be a thrill seeker when it snows.
and unfortunately, we may have this for the next 2 or 3 days with this intense cold.
There won't be any melting.
No melting.
That's for certain. Valerie, we have another mom who you have networked with, who has an email that we're going to share with our audience from another state, because this is an issue across the country, not just in West Virginia. But what's the update on your situation with your children?
My situation, my daughter's doing well. We actually just started the waiver program for and the emotionally disordered waiver, which I knew nothing about. It's similar to the disability waiver. I was lucky enough to have her school administration share it with me, and we started the process. So she's on the list. So we'll see what happens, but hopefully that's to get her the support she needs as she grows and goes through school. The other situation's pretty much the same, but I did find out that there's a good chance that my child's back in the area. Not my child anymore. That's the hard part. Will always be my child, just not legally.
To get your son the help that he needed, you had to renounce your parental rights?
I had to relinquish my rights, yes, so that he would continue to get mental health treatment. Because at that point in time, they were going to send him home. There was no more treatment that they could offer. He was too dangerous to be in a home, so let's send him home.
And has he reached the age of adulthood yet?
In August.
August.
And
Okay.
what age is that now? 18, 21?
18.
18, okay.
Okay. And has the situation in West Virginia improved statewide in regards to places for these kids to go and to try to get better?
No, and that's a big issue. It seems like West Virginia tends to put a lot of the emphasis on the schools to take care of that, which means the schools have to put them in those facilities and pay for them. They're extremely expensive. The schools can't afford them. Plus, you have people from the top saying that you can only have a certain percentage of children that go to those places to have their needs met. So it's politics.
And the situations vary for each child, but in particular, the situation with your son, what were some of the major issues that needed to be addressed?
Oh, the major issues. There was a lack of attachment, which basically meant that there was no respect for authority figures. There was a lot of violence, abuse in every sense of the word. He was dangerous, and he needed to learn coping skills, which he was very smart and could. He just chose not to.
And what age did this behavior begin to show?
The behavior began at the age of 5. It probably began before me, but I didn't notice how extreme it was until we hit about age 8.
And how old were your children when you adopted them?
2 and 5.
And
Were they siblings?
Yes.
They were siblings.
Yeah. Were you aware of the background of your children when you adopted them?
I was aware of some of the information. A lot of it I had to dig for. I was lucky enough to be involved with some of the biological family, so I got some of the information from there, but there was a lot of drugs, alcohol, you name it, that was involved.
When you are in a situation like you were in and your husband adopting these children, is the facility you go through to adopt them, and I assume this is through the state, are they obligated to release all the information about the backgrounds of the children to the parents who are prospective parents who are trying to adopt them?
I don't know if they're obligated. I don't know if they even have a full picture of what it is, because you have to understand that a lot of times they're being taken and the information is going to come from the parents. So is that information going to be true? I don't think they hide things necessarily on purpose all the time, but I think in some instances they are.
In the case of your son, following his life cycle for the last couple, 3 years, you say he was removed from you, and then the question was, where did they send him? And then after the program, you say he's back in the area, you think, but does he have is anybody looking out for him, or is he on his own?
I know nothing because I'm not involved anymore. We actually worked with our psychiatrist to get him placed. That, of course, happened after there was several acute stays at a psychiatric facility, which basically something happened. We took him to the ER. The ER did an assessment to see if he needed to be placed in a place or if we were to take him home.
Okay, you say placed. You're talking about a mentally ill place, or what type of place?
You've heard of Brook Lane?
Not really.
Okay, Brook Lane is a acute psychiatric facility in Maryland. Basically, it's a place that takes children, and they keep them typically a week just to get meds straight, and then they send them home. So it's kind of like having a really bad cold. That's not a great analogy, but that's basically what it is.
But in the case of your son, what happened?
That continued to happen multiple times. Behaviors got worse. Meds weren't working. All of the outside help with therapy, inside school, outside school, family therapy, you name it, was all unsuccessful. So we were led to the only choice we had, which was residential, which meant that the child would go somewhere and live there, go to school there, get treatment. The thing is Medicaid pays for it, but the thing with Medicaid is you're lucky if they let you stay for 6 to 12 months. If it's really bad and they let you stay for 12 months, that's it. They send you home whether you're done treatment or not. In our case, it was so severe that we had to fight the hospitals because they were lying to us about things that were happening there, because I was very involved talking to staff. And we had to work with the insurance commissioner to have him move to another facility to meet his needs. And when we finally ran out as parents of being able to place him somewhere, we actually had to press charges against him in court in order for him to continue to get treatment. So basically it was kind of like reverse foster care. We were still the parents, but the state was taking care of the insurance so that he would get treatment.
Okay, he got treatment where?
Oh, he got treatment many places.
Yeah, but after you filed charges against him.
Yes.
What happened then?
Well, when we filed charges, he had to be in juvenile detention until they found a treatment place. They found the place. They had to do an evaluation, which there was many evaluations here as well. They did an evaluation there. Because of his age, they couldn't find a place to place him. And because of his needs, they said there was no such place. The place he was at, I believe, was in Pennsylvania. And they ended up keeping him, even with the courts, though. There was a lot of I'll tell you this is great. He's doing great. But I was still communicating with others who were telling me the opposite.
John, you had a question?
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit earlier that in West Virginia, the state of West Virginia tends to put the onus for handling these situations really heavily on the schools.
Yes.
I deduce from what you said that that is different from other states. Are you aware of how any other states do that maybe differently, and what those different procedures might be?
I'm not sure what exactly other states do. I do know that a lot of it is put on the school systems nationally. Now,
Okay.
there are different options for parents in different states, and things work differently. In West Virginia, there's very few facilities for children, even though it makes absolutely no sense because of the opioid crisis and everything else we have. We don't have those facilities, and we were actually cited by Governor Tomlin, I believe, for the lack of these places.
Oh, I worked for Governor Tomlin as Deputy Secretary of Revenue, and he was very acutely aware of that. I guess an argument that you hear from West Virginia is, or from some people, we are just about the poorest state in the union. We have the poorest, the least educated, the least healthy people of all the 50 states. So therefore, it would be more difficult for us to fund these kinds of programs like some other states are able to do.
Now, Valerie, before we do run out of time, I want to transition to this letter from, this is a woman that you've networked with. You've never met her, correct? You just talked to her on the phone.
No, I've talked to her on the phone. We've communicated for a few years on my book, Facebook. I put a lot out there for parents, so I have some people reach out to me for help or just discussion.
The letter I'm about to read, do you find this letter to be typical, or her situation is extraordinarily odd?
I find it very typical.
Typical.
Very.
Here is the situation here. Now, this is a person. I know her name, but we've agreed to not use it on the show. It all started when my son watched his teacher taken away from school on an ambulance stretcher. That moment was a wake-up call, not just for my family, but for the glaring issues in our public school systems. Before I share the details, I shall introduce myself briefly. I've had the honor of being a special needs adoptive mother for 15 years. This journey has brought overwhelming love and joy, but also heartbreak and overwhelming challenges. Some of my children carry profound trauma and express it through violence. Others express their pain through timidity. Each one of them is a hurting child deserving of proper care, empathy, and interventions. As a parent, I've learned that one of the most essential gifts we can give our children is boundaries. Reliable, fair, and emphatically delivered consequences are an act of love. Empathetically delivered consequences are an act of love. They tell a child, you are valued, you are safe, and I believe in your ability to grow. But I've come to realize that our school systems are failing to provide these necessary boundaries, particularly for students with special needs and emotional disabilities. This is not an isolated problem. It is happening across America, likely in your own community, and it's harming both students and teachers. My sweet, timid son was deeply affected by what he experienced in his special education classroom. He witnessed teachers being physically assaulted, hit, kicked, screamed at, and hospitalized. He saw classmates overturn desks, throw objects, and disrupt learning for hours. He was told to ignore these incidents even when he felt unsafe. When I raised concerns with the administration, I was told that this chaos was normal in special education. Assault, I was told, was just part of the job for staff in these classrooms. How can this be acceptable? How can we expect our most vulnerable children to learn in an environment defined by fear and disorder? This normalization of violence doesn't just fail the children who are acting out, it fails all children. My son, like so many others, was left feeling unsafe and confused. The message he received was clear. Your feelings of fear don't matter. This is just the way things are. But this isn't just about immediate harm. What happens when children who have been taught that violence is acceptable behavior leave school? No one will excuse them in adulthood. Hitting someone in a grocery store doesn't result in a stern talk. It results in handcuffs. By failing to teach our children accountability and alternative ways to express their emotions, we are setting them up for failure and often incarceration. I don't have all the answers, but I do know this. Normalizing violence and chaos in special education classrooms is unacceptable. We need a better plan, one that includes empowered educators. Teachers and staff must have the training, resources, and support to manage challenging behaviors effectively and compassionately. Clear behavioral standards. Special needs students are capable of growth and learning, but they need consistent and fair consequences to guide them. Safe environments. All children deserve classrooms where they feel secure, respected, and ready to learn. This issue demands the attention of parents, taxpayers, and policymakers. It's time to stop gaslighting families and pretending these problems don't exist. We must work together to create schools where all children, regardless of their abilities, can thrive. Our children deserve better, our teachers deserve better, and our communities deserve better. This is written by a mom in a state that is not West Virginia, just to be clear about that. But Valerie, having gone through what you have gone through as an aide in Jefferson County and having had students in Berkeley County, do you identify with that letter?
I do. You see things in schools that you wouldn't expect to see, and in our most vulnerable classrooms, you see all kinds of things. A lot of times, most of the time, behavior is a form of communication, whether it's violent or not. And some things can look like violence in some people's eyes, but it might not necessarily be. So there's a fine line between things, but I think a big problem is we have these classrooms that most people don't go in. And when staff or parents tend to reach out and say, hey, this is going on, what's wrong? And the first answer is, well, that's normal. No, it shouldn't be normal.
And yet it is. Were you ever told this is normal for your children in a classroom? And when your son was exhibiting those behaviors in classroom that were no doubt affecting perhaps the safety of the teacher and other students?
I was often told it was normal, and I was overwhelmed and exaggerating.
You were exaggerating the
I was
circumstances.
exaggerating.
Did the teacher tell you were exaggerating, or did the administration at the time tell you that?
I've had both. It depended on the teacher. Most of the time, it was administration.
Why would the teacher not take your side if it was your son when you were trying to say that your son was being too violent in the classroom?
A lot of times, my child wasn't violent in the classroom. He was very aware of what he was doing and who he was doing it to and how to make himself look like the victim. So that's where those issues came in.
In the book that you wrote, you described your child in a way that I inferred that he was kind of cold and calculating.
Absolutely. I would antisocial personality disorder type vibes. Yes.
John, you served on the education committee when you were in the House of Delegates at times. How much attention is paid to special education needs in West Virginia on that committee?
Very little. And it's not that people don't want to. Mm-hmm. The committee is usually inundated with problems from other areas of public education. And that's why I asked the question of Valerie earlier. If other states maybe have different areas of government handle much of what now is thrust on education in West Virginia, I would like to know the answer to that. So if there are other ways to do that, I think they might get more attention if they didn't, if it wasn't presumed that all of this revolved around education.
Yes.
The solutions proposed by the mom in the letter,
Mm-hmm.
do you agree with those solutions? Would you add anything to those?
I definitely think there needs to be more training, definitely within the classrooms, but it needs to be school-wide because these students leave the classroom. And sometimes when a student is having a problem, the first thing an adult wants to do is jump in and help. And oftentimes that makes things worse. You almost need to talk to the adult before you talk to the child. And oftentimes the adults that are with the children are dismissed and told to do opposite of what they are trained and know what to do. So it makes issues.
Valerie, Senator Amy Grady is addressing this problem, but I think the core of her her language, her solution is to have an alternative venue for these aggressive students.
That wouldn't work for our students in
Okay.
special ed because they are already in an alternative setting. The problem is some of these students need a different alternative setting, but that costs a lot of money, and the schools don't have a lot of money, so they keep them in the smaller classrooms, and unfortunately, it seems as if it's being covered up.
Bill, I got to cut you off there
Sure.
because we're just about out of time. Valerie, I want to thank you for putting us in touch with your friend or acquaintance who wrote that letter. And in regards to your book, is it still available to be purchased?
It is. It's available on Amazon. You can pretty much order it anywhere. And if you read it, please reach out and tell me your thoughts. Let's have a conversation.
End of the Rainbow.
End of the Rainbow, Memoir of a Mother's Journey by Valerie Dawn.
Very good. Thank you kindly. Final minute next.
If I didn't have